You're watching HRM TV. My name is Shalini Shuklapande. Does the leadership structure in the Middle East strike you as hierarchical and rigid? Speaking to me at the sidelines of the Singapore Human Capital Summit, Mariam Al-Foudery of Agility Logistics gives us some fresh insights that might just change your perceptions. So thank you very much, Mariam, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So how is leadership in the Middle East different from the rest of Asia? What are some myths and truths about it?
Shalini, I don't know that leadership is that different. I think at the end of the day, there are certain characteristics of good leadership that are fairly consistent across every region. You have to be able to, set a vision, have a vision, believe in something, inspire, engage, and empower other people to help lead the organization towards that vision, not just participate in it, but actually lead. Create, I think, conditions for challenge, create an opportunity for people to also be able to challenge what it is that you say, because it's constructive to be able to challenge what you're told and create a condition of trust to be able to do that. And at the end of the day, as a leader, very much do what you say you're going to do, act in the way that you say you believe others should act, and be real. That said, I think in the Middle Eastern context there are some things that are very important. So I think that general umbrella of leadership holds wherever you are. I think in the Middle Eastern context there are some local nuances that are very important to be attuned to. First, I think there is, many people don't realize how consensus-driven Middle East leadership styles are. So especially in the Arabian Gulf where I'm from, we're talking about largely tribal cultures where you have a lot of different stakeholder groups that you have to contend with. And a lot of leadership time, energy, and attention goes into building broad-based agreement around the way forward. So I think there tends to be this myth that Middle Eastern leadership is very hierarchical. There's one man or one woman at the top, usually one man, I think, in the mythology that tells everybody else what to do, and I actually don't think that that's true. I think the other thing that's very important to note about Middle Eastern leadership in general is that these are very relationship-driven cultures. Trust matters a lot. Trust matters more than contractual obligations. Now, again, I don't think that's different from the rest of the world, but I think the level of degree may be different. So I think you really have to, as a leader, how you present yourself, how you do what you say you're going to do, your word is very important, and you have to be seen as credible. I think that's really critical. And also you have to build the sort of personal networks that allow you to be effective. I think the third thing that's very important in a Middle Eastern context is that the situation in the Middle East, as you know right now, is very fluid, it's changing. There's been a dramatic amount of change in a very short amount of time. And I think people that are successful in the Middle Eastern context, both in terms of Middle Eastern business leaders, Middle Eastern or Asian business leaders in the Middle East, have to take a long-term view of business and a long-term view of these markets. You have to be committed to the outcome. You have to be committed to staying, committed to developing people, committed to being in there for the long haul. So I think these are the things that really stand out for me when you talk about Middle Eastern leadership. Yeah,
and what are some talent challenges that are so specific, to the Middle Eastern region?
I think first and foremost you have to look at the demographics of the population. You're talking about a region of the world, by and large, the Middle East and North Africa region, and this is not just the Gulf, it's more than the Gulf, that 50% of the population is under the age of 25. So you are talking about an unprecedented number of young people. It's the second youngest region in the world after Sub-Saharan Africa. So you're talking about all of these young people that are hitting the workforce, and the demand for a huge number of jobs to be created to absorb this young population. But the unemployment rate is very high. Youth unemployment is 24% in the Middle East and North Africa region. The education system, people talk a lot about education in the region because math and science scores tend to be much lower than, let's say, countries in Asia, like Singapore, for example. And there seems to be the sense that there's and the private sector itself, there isn't a hugely diverse private sector, and the private sector is not very mature and robust. So the public sector is still the largest employer of people. In some countries in the Gulf, more than 80% of the population, the local population, works for the public sector, for the government, and not for the private sector. So I think these are all very real demographic socio-political conditions that have to be addressed in the workforce. And what that means for us as employers of these young people that and so on is that you really do have to, one, invest in developing people and be really committed to the sense that they may not have all the skills that you want just coming out of university or out of high school even, but you really need to understand that your role is to develop them and make them more productive members of the workforce.
Right. Well, do you see any changes happening, for HR, like any trends whatsoever within the region anytime soon?
In the Middle East, you mean, trends? I think there are sort of larger trends, and I always talk about the larger trends in the region because right now it's very real. If you're sitting in a Middle Eastern context, you're sitting in a context in which there's been, you really feel that things are different today than they were a few years ago. And I think generally there's a sense that, organizations, all organizations, be they businesses or political institutions and so on, need to be more participatory, they need to be more open and transparent, and there needs to be more dialogue. And I think that that's translating into HR practices as well. I mean, there is this feeling that you have these young people that have a different perspective, that have a different expectations from what it means to be an employee or a citizen for that matter, and you have to take that into account. And I think that's actually a very positive trend.
Oh yeah. All right, great. Anything else you'd like to add?
I think, I've already said it, I think the Middle East, there's a lot of, I think people have very mixed views on the Middle East and of recent developments in the Middle East. And there's a sense that it's a little bit scary, a little bit volatile, is this really where we want to be? And I am a firm believer that this is a part of the world with a huge amount of potential. You have a young population where a lot of the developed world has, aging populations. You have people that are relatively well educated. Maybe they don't have all the skill sets that we would like, and they haven't really been trained for business, but these are not, people are, education levels are high. You have a lot of aspirations, you have people that want to do a lot. And I think this is especially true of women in the Middle East, women and men, but you have this real hunger and thirst to succeed and to make something meaningful of people's lives. And I think those are great conditions for businesses that have a vision. So I would say don't write off the Middle East. It's a fantastic place to be in, and it has a lot of potential.